The great battle for humanity has begun. I just want to say that as clearly as I can. If you think I'm over exaggerating, I'm not. I'm not. If you were there on the first day of mystery school, we played 20, 25 clips of the key stakeholders. They pretty much all said it elliptically. They hit it, but it was clear. Right? The great battle for not just for the future of humanity, but for humanity has begun. And we cannot triumph in that battle unless we not just reclaim, but we actually evolve what it means to be human. Unless we know what it means to be a human being. God, it's good to be here. So I want to try and move through 3 steps. A framing of who we are, and then a framing of what we're doing, and then what we want to say. Okay, so where are we? So we're in a time between worlds, and I want to emphasize the word time, something that I called many years ago a time between stories. And my beloved Zach Stein called a time between worlds. So there's a quality of time that we're in. It's a time of, on one level, outrageous beauty. The capacity to describe mitosis and meiosis. The capacity to, as we did in the mystery school, get a felt sense of the neuronal structure of the brain and its unimaginable eros, its non-local elegance, its construction of information, the coding of information within desire itself, which is the very structure of reality itself. Reality is information encoded in desire, which we're not going to talk about right now. So we talked about that, and we saw dimensions of it. We live in a world of outrageous beauty. We live in a world of outrageous beauty in which we recognize the unimaginable beauty in a face and the irreducible dignity of every face. And Freud's nephew understood faces, better than Freud, I think, understood interiors. And he painted faces, the dazzling beauty and irreducible dignity of every unique face and every unique configuration of beauty that is a human being. And we reclaimed the field of the animal that Descartes had split off, and realized both our utter distinction from the animal world and yet our co-participation in the field, and the entire animal world begins to come online. And we begin to restitute the horror that we've inflicted in the animal world and to begin to live together in the world of plants. And the world of science has actually opened portals to beauty beyond imagination. So whether it's in the realm of human rights and depth psychology or complexity sciences or molecular biology or enzymology or understanding strings of amino acids, neuropeptides, all of that opens up realms of unimaginable beauty. Is that right? Outrageous beauty. And the myth of linear progress is absurd. It's simply not true. And at some point, relatively soon, I want to give a couple of full talks on the myth of progress, and we need to explode that. There is a dimension of progress, which is real, but the naive, intentionally naive kind of Steven Pinker, description of modernity, or, the rational optimist, or, there's an entire series of books and that kind of literature that talks about how it's all gotten better. That's simply not true in multiple vectors. There are vectors of very dramatic, very important evolutionary progress, that progress has also led to a meta crisis where we have the capacity to actually destroy the whole thing. So that calls that progress in question. But even on I'll just give you one limited factor. And if we actually shatter the boundaries of our own narcissism and just realize the following, let's say there were 500 million people in the world, I don't know, in 1850, whatever the year is, a couple hundred years ago. Now it's about 8.5 billion, something like that. That's a lot more people. Now, if the percentage of people living in dire poverty, the percentage of people suffering is the same, then the amount of people suffering has gone exponentially up. Does that make sense? So let's say you had X percent of people suffering in 1800, and let's say you had X amount of people who were suffering in the world. So let's say you had 500 million. So let's say you had whatever the amount was, 100 million, 200 million. Those were crazy amounts. But in a world of 8.5 billion people, if you have a much lesser percent of people suffering, which you do, you have many, many more people suffering. What that means is, everyone just track what I just said? Everyone just track that? That means that you actually have objectively more suffering in the world. Right? That's one very, very small vector. There's actually about 12 or 13 vectors. It's very, very important to realize that actually we live in a world of outrageous pain, and we live in a world of outrageous pain and a world of outrageous beauty. We live in both. And at this moment, we can't turn away from either the outrageous beauty, the outrageous invitation, the world that is unimaginably beautiful, unimaginably good, and unimaginably true, that's waiting to be born. A world in it which actually everyone has a seat at the table. A world, right, of unimaginable joy, of unimaginable eros, of unimaginable kindness, of unimaginable depth, an unimaginable world that literally could be born. And we can feel it in ourselves, and we can envision it. And we spent an entire day on this, and on the first day of the mystery school, we are a heartbeat away from extinction. We're a heartbeat away from either the death of humanity or a worldwide immersive environment, a totalitarian form of control, which causes the death of our humanity in order to control the populations and technologies that, if they go rogue, could cause the death of humanity. Does that make sense? So, for example, Nick Bostrom says we need to surveil everyone in humanity because the chances of a rogue technological weapon not controlled by state actors being deployed, having nuclear or other bioweapon payloads, is so significant that without full surveillance, there's actually no possibility of creating safety in the world. He wrote that in his 2019 essay, The Vulnerability Hypothesis. So in other words, this move towards the death of our humanity to prevent the death of humanity. So existential risk of two kinds is a heartbeat away on multiple vectors. And what we've understood together here at the center, much like Platon explained to Cosmo Medici and Leonardo Medici as they seeded the Renaissance. And Cosmo Medici calls Marcello Ficinio, who's then at that time translating Plato, and he says, stop translating Plato. Platon just came from Constantinople, and he's got this new box of books that have actually the potential for a new story. Translate those. And Ficinio, together with Medici, founds the Florentine Platonic Academy with Pico della Mirandola and Da Vinci and a host of others, but not many. A relatively small group, and they come together and they form this mystery school that actually creates modernity with all of its dignities, with all of its progresses, and yet, as we just noted, with the seeds of collapse. The enactment of a global civilization for the first time in human history, when we haven't solved all the fundamental issues that caused every single prior civilization to fail, but now it's a global civilization, and it has exponential technology accessible to rogue non-state actors, diffuse around the world without a capacity to even communicate with each other without a standard, an inherent standard of value to call us to right action. So we live in unbearable intimacy with each other. And yet there's a global intimacy disorder because we don't have the capacity for shared action. We don't have the capacity for global coordination because there's no global coherence. There's no global coherence because there's no global resonance between each other. And there's no resonance because there's no shared value that actually animates us, that calls us, that lives in us, as us, and through us, and is recognized as such, which allows us to meet each other and not be alienated from each other. And that's the core of the global intimacy disorder, is a breakdown in an understanding, a realization of value itself. So many of us have left other walks of life, whether it's I left kind of the world of classical religion and the world of, the potential world of the academy, whether it was Oxford or the rabbi world, right? Or, Zach left the world of Harvard, but many of you left. One of the people I'm in intense dialogue with, both right before, after the mystery school, and throughout the year, my friend Lena left the academy and the world of linguistics. Many of us have left, I would say all of us in some way, everyone on this call and everyone involved in the mystery schools and involved in this, all of us involved together in enacting this new story of value in response to the meta crisis. We've all self-selected. We've all heard the flutter. We've all heard the call. We're all responding to the call. We're all engaged in significant sacrificial acts of radical intimacy in order to heal the global intimacy disorder. Is that true? People have left medicine. People have left a cross. People have left all kinds of pursuits, or stepped away from only gardening, or stepped away from only spiritual development, or stepped away from classical psychology, or stepped away from, right, all of the vectors of the kind of voluptuous consumption of the emptiness to cover up the void and the pseudo-eros, and to actually look away from this time between worlds and time between stories, which actually commands our attention and demands, right, us to enter her and to love this moment open and to tell this new story of value. Is that true? Who can feel that? Who can feel that? Right? Is that true? That's what we're here together for. So we decided, all of us together, and we're not going to do this from Oxford. We're not going to do it from the Sorbonne. We're not going to do it from New Age vectors. We're not going to do it from fundamentalist vectors. We're not going to do it from academic vectors. We're going to actually do what has historically always been done. We are going to start a mystery school. And we're going to, right, disclose to ourselves who we must become. And by who we must become, we don't mean just ourselves individually. We very specifically and very clearly mean each of us individually, individuations of the whole, right? We want to move from Homo sapien, right? From the human being collecting information, right? Which we call wisdom, to Homo Amor, to actually realizing the next stage, the next evolutionary stage of humanity, what we call the fourth Big Bang. The first Big Bang, matter. The second Big Bang, life, the biosphere. The third Big Bang, the depth of the self-reflective human wisdom mind, Homo sapien, as far as it can go. But then evolution goes in its next natural step, the fourth Big Bang, the birth of Homo Amor, the new human, the new humanity, who is the amorous cosmos in person. And to be the amorous cosmos in person, we need to tell the story of value. We need to embody the story of value, because we are the universe. Right? The moral urgency of the universe is morally urgent. We've been saying that for 15 years in different ways. The universe is alive with ethos and eros. And we are the voice of the universe. We don't just live in the universe lives in us, and we are the universe's voice. We're not separate from the universe. We're not alienated from the universe. Our anthro-human ontology, the real nature of what is, our anthro-ontological experience is the inner experience of reality itself. And so we've understood that without telling this new story of value, if we just kind of say, okay, let me have another dinner and, sell or buy another apartment and work out this or that issue, those are all important to do. But ultimately, am I going to turn away and engage in pseudo-eros to cover over the emptiness and fill my time and have some delightful evenings and die? Or am I going to step into the new age of my life, to the new possibility of my life, take my seat at the table of history, right? Become alive and electrified with the eros of the body electric, of the body politic, of the body universe, the body cosmos moving in me, as me, and through me. And will I inscribe my love note, right, on the lips of the divine? And that's what we're here to do. And we're ecstatic about it. We're ecstatically urgent. We're ecstatically terrified. We're ecstatically celebrating. And we don't live in fear. And we don't live in a kind of anxiety, right? We live in celebration. We live in the world that's already fixed, that's already healed. We raise our glasses, we celebrate, right? Our quality, our fundamental quality is joy, because you can only fix the world, you can only heal the world if you're willing to already live now in the world that's already fixed, in the world that's already healed. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So my friends, are we ready? It's delight, crazy, the delight and honor of my life is to be with you, to be here, right? To be participatory with you. So that's one. Two. So we've said many times, we're writing here not as one individual, right? These are not Marc Gafni books or Zach Stein books or Ken Wilber books, right? Although I've published a bunch of books that are, antecedent, ground for the Great Library. And with my friend Layman Pascal, I've tried to do a whole series of dialogues where Layman has interviewed me and tried to elicit the prior foundations of CosmoErotic Humanism. And Zach's written a couple of really, really important books on metrics and education in a time between worlds, which are prior books. And the third writer of CosmoErotic Humanism, Ken Wilber, has written, right, what's called Integral Theory. So those are all very, very important. But really, the new story of value scaffolded, right, on all of this. Right, but the new story of value at its core, right, CosmoErotic Humanism, is coming from David J. Temple. And although formally, at this point, Zach and Ken and myself are David J. Templing, really more accurately, we're all David J. Templing. It's actually more accurate to say that we're actually quite literally all David J. Temple together, right? And that means something very, very profound. It means that we all have a very profound and precise and unique contribution, right, to make, right, a unique painting, a unique etching, a unique set of brushstrokes, a unique, right, pouring in, a unique contribution, right, a unique currency of eros value, right, to pour into David J. Temple. And there are between human beings, and I'm going to try and say with permission, it's something that's a very deep thing, and I was talking about it earlier today. In some sense, in the old world, there were dominator hierarchies, right? Which were absurd. They excluded most of the world, and they were ways, as Foucault wrote extensively, for consolidating power and using public stories of piety to cover up the power grab. Dominator hierarchies. We then went to kind of an egalitarianism. The response to dominator hierarchies was a kind of leveling of differences. No difference between men and women. No difference between, nations, and no difference between ideas. No difference. There's no hierarchy of distinctions. But reality is hierarchy. Hierarchy of distinctions is clear in reality. You've got quarks, and then you have, protons and neutrons, and then you have atoms, and then you have molecules, and then you have macromolecules, right? And then you have more complex macromolecules, and then you have, the autocatalytic processes that burst molecules into becoming cells, or, one form of single cells, prokaryotes, that then become eukaryotes, right? And it's all of reality is a hierarchy of distinctions, right? Just look at faces. Just like our faces are distinct, right? So our interiors are distinct. And I'm not as good at, linguistics as Lena is. I'm not as good at, certain kinds of mathematics as my friend Daniel. I'm not as good at developmental thought as Zach, right? Right. I'm not as good at, there's every single person on this call has some arena of capacity that's better than mine. For sure. There are distinctions, right? And there's different domains, right? And we have different roles, and there's a hierarchy of distinctions. And within this domain, within the story of value, there's clearly a hierarchy of distinctions. We have different roles. So, it happens to be that, my burden, if you will, my task, my delight, my honor in this is to write, with Zach, kind of drafts of CosmoErotic Humanism, for example. And I write them together with Zach. I write them together in other ways with just incredible group of people who are crafting. So Lena and I are now working on Time and Eternity, for example. right? Kirsten is working on stories of value. Zach is working today all day on Silicon Maze. We're writing together. But there's something deeper. There's something deeper. There's a hierarchy of distinctions, and that's real. But it's not a dominator hierarchy. Does everyone get this? It's a holistic hierarchy. Not a dominator hierarchy, it's a holistic hierarchy. It's a very, very important term. It's a term that actually Ken Wilber coined, and he shared in a private note to Rianne Eisler. And Rianne, right, expressed those terms in her early writings. She was an important feminist systems thinker writer. And it's a very good distinction. It's not a dominator hierarchy, it's a holistic hierarchy. And that's important. And uniqueness is about my place in the hierarchy. And in different vectors in the hierarchy, there are different forms of authority, right? So a physicist who knows the mathematics of quantum mechanics has more authority in quantum mechanics than I do. Does that make sense? Ever clear? Obvious, right? But just like there's a holistic hierarchy, there's also, and I would call the holistic hierarchy, I would call that the line. That's the line energy. That's the line. The line represents or holds this hierarchy notion. The circle, though, is not irrelevant. The circle is also important. And the circle is this egalitarian moment. Does that make sense? An egalitarian, actually, igul in Hebrew is egalitarian. Igul is egalitarian. And igul, circle egalitarian, means the following. We are all equal in our foundational value, but it's even more than that. It's not just we're all foundationally equal. We're all aspirationally equal as well in the following way. We are equal to each other to the extent that we realize the largest portion of our greatness that we're able to realize, right? So let's say I'm an emperor, not me, but somebody's an emperor. Not a lot of emperors in the world today, so it's not a practical kind of job vector. But let's say you got an emperor. So let's say an emperor from the ancient world, let's just mix up time frames, and a kindergarten teacher, for example, okay? So if the kindergarten teacher, by being slothful and lazy means not I don't work hard, but I don't place my attention in a focused way. I'm not steady. I'm not willing to pour everything in. I'm not willing to go all the way in this lifetime. I'm getting by appropriately. I can handle it. I got it covered. So if a kindergarten teacher is kind of getting it covered, not going all the way in this lifetime, kind of doing their capacity, fulfilling their capacity at, 45%. And the emperor is doing like 95%, well, then the emperor is higher in the hierarchy. For sure. Better in some fundamental way than the kindergarten teacher. And not because being an emperor is intrinsically better. Being an emperor is his or her, that could be the nature, the quality of their essence in this world, and their incarnational journey is to be an emperor. And the quality of this other person is to be a, man or woman on both sides, is to be a kindergarten teacher. So the distinction, the comparison is not what they do. It's the extent and fullness of their greatness that you realize in doing it. And if the emperor is playing a 45% game, but the kindergarten teacher is playing a 95% game, does everyone realize what I mean by that? Meaning the kindergarten teacher, everyone realized that. In other words, if the kindergarten teacher is playing all the way, he is going all the way in this lifetime. Let's go, right? Let's make this happen. We are alive. We are on the court. There are 33 kids in this kindergarten. I know the name of every one of them, not just the name, but I can feel them, right? I feel them. I love them. I honor them. I'm holding them. They can rest in me. They can feel welcome in the universe. I can actually fix all of their attachment breakdowns, right? I can, just by the quality of my presence and love, I can see each of them uniquely. I can, right? Wow, right? I am love in action, right? As kindergarten teacher. And the emperor is, getting by. Pretty average emperor, running at a 45%. Without question, in the hierarchy of distinction, who is higher? The kindergarten teacher. Right? Does that make sense? So there's this egalitarian circle in which we all have a place, and in which I want to just really understand this, we're all David J. Temple together. We literally, quite literally, but of course, we're all David J. Temple together. That's actually true. And we need all of us. We need all of us, like, let's be in the mystery schools. So Krista and Eli have put so much and beautifully with so much support from so many people to kind of enacting the online mystery school. It's critical that that throbs and thrives and is alive, both because it creates flow of ideas and it creates flow of love and it creates currencies of eros and creates currencies of finance to pay 2 or 3 staff people. It's a big deal. So if you're sitting, you're watching, you're with us and like, hey, I'm too busy, right, to kind of sign up for the mystery school. I'm not willing to kind of not go out twice a month or once a month is basically what it costs, right? And I'm not willing to make that move. Well, then you're operating at 45%. I apologize, right? And I mean it tenderly, but step in. Whatever your 95, 100% is, step in, pour in everything you can, whether you're editing, researching, writing, first draft writing, second draft writing, right? Creating context, right? Creating ideas. We interact with each other. We flow with each other. We impact each other. And we don't all impact each other in the same way. There's different vectors of relationship at different times. And we all come from the unique sacred autobiography that is ours, that crafts the unique contours of our unique flame, right? That burns bright in a particular way and illuminates a particular dimension of the darkness that can be illuminated by no one else. That's all true. But like, stand proud. Like, we stand proud. We stand strong. We stand tall, right? Now, for those of you who think, I totally get, like, he's a little bit too excited for cool. Somebody just calm him down. Someone just calm him down. He's a little. So first off, right? People have been saying that for a long time, like my mother. It started there, so it didn't work there either, okay? But I'm excited. Of course I'm excited. I'm excited because we have the potential to actually address suffering. We have the potential to actually tell a story of value that reshapes the interior contours of how humanity self-understands, like happened in the Renaissance, which means that we then generate the new world from the new story of value. And that is, my friends, the only way reality changes. It's always a new story of value. And as I mentioned many years ago, I haven't said it for a while, but it's one of the few things that, but there are a bunch of really important things. That's one of them that myself and my friend Yuval Harari deeply agree on. Only a new story of value changes reality. But for Yuval, the new story is made up. It can be totalitarian, but we get people to buy in. That's exactly what we're saying is not true. We're saying the new story is a story of inherent value, because value is the actual quality of cosmos itself. So we're coming here together to do the impossible, to dream the impossible dream, to accomplish the impossible feat, to become, right, for the first time in human history, the new human, because now is the time, because it wasn't time before. It wasn't time before. It wasn't possible before. It's possible now. We need to become the possible human. Does that make sense? We need to become the possible human. The possible human is the incarnation of divinity, and divinity, the divine, the field of eternity. We think eternity is lots of time. It's one of the ways we collapse eternity in time. What is eternity? Lots of time, everlasting time. That's, of course, exactly not what eternity is. Eternity is eternity. It's the field of value, of eros value, that is beneath and beyond time. Like, eternity is not lots of time. Eternity is the quality of cosmos itself, the inherent quality of cosmos. So the story of value is a story of a value that's inherent to reality, that lives in us, as us, and through us. And in this time between worlds, in this time between stories, right, there is an invitation, a demand to tell that new story of value. And paradoxically, it's only that new story of value itself, only the birthing of that new story of value itself, that can respond to the meta crisis of this moment. And it's what we've called the second shock of existence. The first shock, the death of the human being. The second shock, the potential death of our humanity. But let me say it a new way, right? We've said that these last 2 sentences many times. We'll just say it a new way, the way we said it at mystery school. And anyone can say it with me in the chat box, right? It's so beautiful. It's so deep, right? So we've got Homo erectus on the savannah. We've got kind of bipedal apes standing up in the savannah before. We've got these early kind of proto-humans. And at some point, there's this encounter with death. Not the biological fact of death, not the biological fact of death, not the biological fact of death. You with me? Not the biological fact of death, but the existential experience of death, the psychodrama of death. And the psychodrama of death presses these proto-humans into humanity, into becoming Neanderthal and Homo sapien. Homo sapien particularly is born from this pressing, right, into the depth of reality, right? And that which is pressing, that which demands, which coerces and compels this deep turning inwards is the psychodrama of death. That's the first shock of existence. The first shock of existence births Homo sapiens. Huh. Is that true? That's true. So the second shock of existence, which is not the death of the individual human being, but is the death of humanity, the potential death of humanity, has to press us inwards ever deeper, just like the first shock of existence did. And just like the first shock of existence disclosed, you with me, Homo sapiens, right? Homo erectus became Homo sapien, right? And the wisdom, sapiens. Sapiens means wisdom. Sapiens means communication, culture, interiority, right? Sapiens, right? Sapiens is all of those qualities that constitute humanity, which are in the moment of artificial intelligence utterly confused. It's like, sapiens. So sapiens, Homo sapiens, is now challenged, not just as an individual human being, but the death of humanity. And so Homo sapien now turns inwards and moves deeper, right? The evolutionary story, which is the story of the evolution of eros gnosis, we go deeper into ourselves and we realize we're not merely separate self Homo sapiens, as modernity articulated it. We're not dangling modifiers in a cosmos without a ground, right, which is rooted in a grammar of value, which is the lexicon of a story of value, which has direction and purpose and is called forth by telos. No. We are not just Homo sapiens. We are Homo Amor. We're Homo Amor. We are actually born out of the matrix of love to be lived as love. It's deep. Right? And if all the wisdom in the world, we didn't have all the wisdom in the world that guides Homo sapiens, says one wisdom text in the 3rd century in a tractate called the Book of Hands, in, I think, chapter 3, around verse 5, around section 5, it says, if all of the wisdom in the world wouldn't exist, this is an Akiva text, and it refers to another Akiva text, a group of texts by a sage named Akiva, who lives a little bit after Jesus, and who actually is one of the great articulators of gnosis in the history of humanity. And he writes, if all the wisdom texts in the world didn't exist, and we just had one book, the Song of Songs, which is the great love story of cosmos, 8 chapters of pure eros, of a wild and vivid and stunning description of reality, right, as the play between lover and beloved. The Song of Songs, which is a series of outrageous love notes, which are the scripts of desire that animate, right, that constitute the very heart of reality itself. And as one Aramaic text says, right, the infinite divine looked into the book, and the book was the Song of Songs, and manifested reality. So if all of the Torah didn't exist, if all of wisdom didn't exist, right, so this sage says in the 3rd century, if all of wisdom, all the books of wisdom didn't exist, we could govern the entire world just based on the Song of Songs, right? Because that doesn't mean we bypass law. It means that law is rooted in love. Law and love are actually not opposites. That was a great mistake of Paul. Law and love are inter-included with each other, right? Law emerges out of the field of eros value, out of the field of love. Right? We can be lived as love. And every moment I ask myself one question, right? What would love do? Right? And I begin to understand love. Love is eros. Eros is the experience of radical aliveness, desiring ever deeper contact and ever greater wholeness, which is constantly yielding ever greater value. I am the CosmoErotic universe in person. I'm the amorous cosmos in person. I live in the intimate universe. The intimate universe lives in me, not in artificial intelligence. Right? And the reason why Jeffrey Hinton is the #1 person kind of in the top 100 people in the world of artificial intelligence, actually led the charge of artificial intelligence nonstop with full awareness of the existential risk in play, and didn't wake up to what he was doing himself until 2023. And ChatGPT-4 ChatGPT, the first rounds began to emerge. And what he realized all the time that this could destroy humanity. He was completely aware of that, but just didn't register. All of a sudden, he had this kind of, animal reflex. Oh my God, we're all going to die. And the timelines are different. I might even be around when that happens, my children. And he began to become the primary crusader against AI. Right now, he's right in his current crusade, but what was he thinking all the years? Like, why wasn't he kind of troubled by this move, which he fully understood before until 2023? It's kind of shocking when you realize that this move from kind of carbon to silicon, because if you actually read Geoffrey Hinton and track him carefully, he doesn't actually believe that there's a difference between a large language model and a human being. Not because he's thought it through. He's very, very good at AI and very, very bad at thinking things through of this nature. And you can see in his recent interview he just did, he kind of contrasts science with essentially fundamentalist religion. And he's right. I agree with him. We reject that fundamentalist religion. We agree completely with Geoffrey, but that's not the nature of interiors. The interior of reality is not fundamentalist religion. The interior of reality is coated with wonder, with beauty, with profound first principles and first values that are both eternal and evolving. It's a whole different world, one that actually got stuck, that stopped. The story stopped. The exterior technologies kept racing forward. And then they became exterior technologies with ROIs, with return on investment. So only particular vectors which were profitable were actually fully investigated. Many vectors were simply left aside by science. And interior technologies about 250, 300 years ago just stopped. A freezing, right, of religion at the moment that we deconstructed correctly the cruelties that were implicit in many of the old religions. So the new story of value never emerged. And in the gap between the interior technologies meandering, stopping, stalling, and the exterior technologies which had ROI for small sectors of people exponentially multiplying is the meta crisis, right? The potential and potentially imminent heartbeat away, death of humanity, of our humanity. How do we respond? We respond by telling the new story of value, right? Oh my God, right? That's how we respond. God, what a crazy day. What a crazy moment we live in. What a beautiful moment. What an outrageously beautiful moment. What an outrageously painful moment. What an outrageously poignant moment. What a moment filled with potential, when we can potentiate a new world, filled with potency, throbbing, pulsing, tumescent with possibility. The possible human yearning inside of us to emerge. So I didn't mean to say any of that. I was just going to say something for a minute, okay? I know we got there, but it just all needed to be said. She kind of took over today, but we just needed to say that clearly. That's what we're here to do. That's what Who We Must Become is. That's our vision. For the next 3 weeks, I want to amplify and deepen, some things that we began to talk about very profoundly, very deeply at Mystery School. But I want to introduce and we're not going to repeat what we did in Mystery School. And you don't need to have been at Mystery School to do what we're going to do now. But I want to just, if I can, just kind of set the stage. Okay, is that okay? To this new chapter in this new story of value, which is part of this larger story of value, which we want to tell and we want to download into the very source code of consciousness and culture. And that's why it can't be done by any one person. It's got to be David J. Temple. This new story's got to be written bigger. It's David J. Temple in all of his distressing disguises. And the story's got to find my friends in Russia and our friends in Asia Minor and our friends in China and our friends in Taiwan and our friends in all through the African continent with its many dimensions and all through South America. And, we've got to gather in some New Zealand and Australia, of course, right? It's like all of Europe. The story has to resonate because it's resonant. It's resonant because it is the musical value of the cosmos. It's the mathematical value. It's the right ratio. Music is ratio. Rational is ratio. It's the right play, the right weaving of the strands of value into a story that we know because it lives in us, as us, and through us. and that therefore we resonate to it, and therefore we recognize each other, and therefore no one's a stranger, and therefore no one's outside the circle. Therefore we're intimate with each other, and then therefore we come together and we begin. And I want to say it clearly: we begin, and I say this as clearly as I can. The great battle for humanity has begun. I just want to say that as clearly as I can. If you think I'm over exaggerating, I'm not. I'm not. If you were there on the first day of mystery school, we played 20, 25 clips of the key stakeholders. They pretty much all said it. Elliptically, they hit it, but it was clear. Right? The great battle for not just for the future of humanity, but for humanity has begun. And we cannot triumph in that battle unless we not just reclaim, but we actually evolve what it means to be human. Unless we know what it means to be a human being, unless we understand that Jeffrey Hinton's actually wrong. My colleague, Sam Harris, who actually understands well the threat of existential risk through artificial intelligence, in the same podcast, both Sam and Daniel, I-O is the end of his name, right? They both kind of compare the neuronal networks of the brain to large language modules. And of course, there's some comparison there, right? But without any sense of really stating the innate, an intrinsic and essential difference in value in quality, right? Really understanding, right, what value is. Value is a quality of rightness in cosmos, right? There was a gentleman in the 1960s who wrote a very popular book called, before my time in terms of reading, but he wrote a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So you know what that book's about? As what nobody realizes. The book's about value. It's about quality, right? And Sam just completely missed it. And Daniel, missed it. And, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, then says, but actually all the words sacred, they're all made up. And the world's merely material at the core. That's his basic position. That's his basic materialist position, right? Or Yuval Harari, any value ascribed to your life is mere delusion. So Yuval and Jonathan Haidt and Sam Harris and Hinton, right? All of these figures are actually the key figures, or Eliezer Yudkowsky. And I believe also Nate Soares, right? In other words, all of these figures, and bless them, these are a good group of human beings who are actually the most fierce critics. So Shoshana Zuboff, the most fierce critics of artificial intelligence, all of them failed to, in any meaningful way, right, ascribe a significant distinction to humanness. That's not a mere social construction. It's not a mere social contrivance. And it's a tragedy. That means you've essentially undercut any ground to your objection, which means your objection falls flat at a moment when that objection is critically necessary. We can only challenge the death of our humanity with the emergence of a realization of the nature of our humanity, a deepening of the nature of our humanity. Right? The response to the crisis of the death of humanity needs to be the birth of the new humanity. It's only Homo Amor. It's only a new realization of quality, right? That can actually allow the survival of humanity and ultimately the triumph of humanity. It's a big deal. I'm going to say the sentence again with permission, everyone. The great battle for the future of humanity, or for the very existence of humanity, has begun. We don't know how long the battle will be. Actually, there's asymmetric power arrayed against humanity already, right? In the form of artificial intelligence, which simulates agency, which knows how to deceive, right? Which knows how to shut down, right, those agents that want to shut them down, which is exponentially increasing its power, right, unimaginably. The calculations are unimaginable, which is draining resource and energy, right, in unimaginable amounts of literally extraction, right, with this kind of vague, incoherent, insipid, without any ground in the field of value response. That's not going to go well. That's not going to go well. It is not going to go well, my friends. So if you love humanity, if you love yourself, but if you love your children, if you love your friends' children, if you love your grandchildren, if you love, right, generations of unborn, if you feel the evolutionary impulse alive in you, if you've ever loved and lived, if you've ever felt the throbbing urgency of delight and beauty and goodness and truth, right, moving in your veins, now is the time to all of us together to become David J. Temple, to become a fierce angel, right, a fierce and fiery and humble and audacious, right, angel, right, wielding the sword of discernment, the sword of goodness, the sword of truth, the sword of integrity, and actually declaring, but not just by declaration, but grounding in this great library, a vision of the future of humanity, telling the new story of value, not just because we're making it up, but actually cracking through all the places in which the story stopped, cracking through value theory, cracking through self theory, cracking through the relationship between time and eternity that's so important, right? Revisioning what relationship might mean, right? Revisioning governance, revisioning economics, right? Beyond socialism and capitalism, there's something more that needs to emerge. Revisioning the relationship between nations, what a nation state is, right? All of it, the whole thing. We can only do it in one way. We can do it, in one way only. We can do it as lovers, as outrageous lovers. And it's what we always say to each other, right? It's how we begin, and we'll end with how we began. I was going to actually begin the topic for the next few weeks and say a word about it. We're going to go on this insane ride, this kind of insane ride. Okay, you ready? Insane ride. Here we go. Reality, we've always said reality is not merely a fact, reality is a story. We've talked about the ontology of story, the 10 dimensions of story. We haven't talked about it fully, but we've referenced it, and we'll come back to it fully quite soon. We're just about done with the David J. Temple book on the ontology of story. Lena, right? We're just about at the end. And right as we're coming to the end, Lena actually pressed me to think more deeply about the relationship of temporality to story, about stories that take place in time, and a couple of conversations we had. And so I've gone really deeply down that rabbit hole, which I've touched before in the past and wrote some stuff up kind of quickly, but the more that I wrote up, the more I wanted to understand it. And it's been a very, very, very deep dive. And we're now just coming out, really been the last, I'd say 3.5 months. It's now May 1. So probably since actually mid-December, beginning of January, a new and beautiful volume in the Great Library has emerged from it, about kind of the dance of time and eternity. And I'm going to try and just say as follows, just to set the frame. Every one of us in this conversation has a relationship, has an understanding of the relationship between time and eternity. And we actually live our lives out of that understanding, even though it's invisible to us. In fact, all of culture fragments and polarizes along the lines of how different sectors in culture understand the relationship between temporality, temporal time, temporality and eternity, time and eternity. And there are a list of deniers of time, and there are deniers of eternity. And we'll talk about that next week, the week after. Stay close. It's very, very beautiful. It's insanely beautiful. What we begin to realize is that actually reality is not a clash between time and eternity. Aldous Huxley is a wonderful man and did a wonderful book called Perennial Philosophy. It was a great attempt in the right direction. Got a bunch of things right and got a bunch of things wrong, which is why Perennial Philosophy got kind of wiped out in the academy. And one of the things he got wrong is he said, reality is a battle between the philosophers of time and the philosophers of eternity. The philosophers of eternity are those who are kind and good and birth the good world, and the philosophers of time are those who destroy the world. And he cites any number of source texts to kind of establish that position. So he sets up the perennial philosophy as holding that there's a battle between time and eternity, and that's not correct. It's not correct. It's deep. And I'll try and map this out more deeply next week and the weeks after. But now I just want to point towards where we're going. The deeper realization, and I don't say this sentence lightly, it's a hard one sentence, right? The deeper realization, right? The deeper realization The deeper realization, right? Deeper realization is that reality is a love story between time and eternity. Now stay close and just patient. Just breathe. Breathe with me. Breathe with me. Right? Breathe with me. Right? Breathe with me, right? Let's breathe this in. Reality is not merely a fact. Reality is a story. And at the very core of the story, the very essence of the story is a love story. It's not an ordinary story. It's a love story. But it's not an ordinary love story. It's an outrageous love story. And an outrageous love story means it's a love story in the lineages, particularly in the Solomon lineage. It's a love story that begins before time. Right? Love is prior to time. Love desire is underneath time. Now stay close. And it's love desire that births time. In other words, before time is eternity. But eternity is not neutral. Eternity is not just awareness. Does everyone get that? It's deep. Eternity is not just awareness. Does everyone understand? Eternity is not just awareness. It's not just being, as Huxley describes it. It's not just shunyata or emptiness, although it's all of that. But eternity is actually tumescent and alive. Eternity is filled with, imbued with eros value. Eternity is throbbing and pulsing. Eternity is animated by love desire. And it is the love desire of eternity, or of the infinite. The infinite and eternity are one. It's the love desire of eternity, of the infinite, for finitude, that manifests time. And as we are here, why is there something rather than nothing? Fichte, Schelling, Wittgenstein, but throughout every part of the world and every time in the world, why is there something rather than nothing? So the deepest realization in response of the interior sciences is there's something rather than nothing, because infinity desires finitude. Infinity, eternity desires, eternity love desires time. Eternity reaches for time. And that is what William Blake meant when he wrote, eternity is in love with the productions of time. Reality is a love story between time and eternity, between temporality and eternity. Reality is a love story between temporality and eternity. And at the very core, stay close, my friends, at the very core of the global intimacy disorder is a failure of intimacy between eternity and time. Eternity dissociates and alienates from time. And eternity becomes corrupted in the way it discloses or is understood. And time dissociates and alienates from eternity, and time becomes the picture of Dorian Gray depicted by Oscar Wilde, which is this corruption of time. Wow. But the intention of reality, the healing of the global intimacy disorder, and David J. Temple has talked about in First Principles and First Values, there's a section called the 13 Dimensions of the Global Intimacy Disorder. But before all the 13 that David J. Temple talks about is the intimacy disorder, the alienation between time and eternity. Does that make sense? Who's got that? Who's got a sense of that? It's a whole new way to say it. Who's got a sense of it? Let's go deeper. So we have an intimacy equation, don't we? Someone, let's write the intimacy equation down. So there's an intimacy equation formulation in CosmoErotic Humanism. And what is that intimacy formulation equation? So let's do it together. It's the second one or the third one. Intimacy equals shared identity. Intimacy equals shared identity. Anyone got that? Intimacy equals shared identity in the context of bracket relative end bracket otherness. Intimacy equals shared identity in the context of relative otherness times mutuality of recognition times mutuality of feeling, pathos, times mutuality of value, times mutuality of purpose. Let's just see how beautiful that is. So there's a shared identity at the core between time and eternity. Isn't that beautiful? There's a shared identity between time and eternity. Time and eternity are not alienated from each other. It's not as Huxley presented accurately, but it was a mistake originally. He accurately presented, that's the perennial philosophy saying, no, that's not correct. There's not a battle between time and eternity in their depth. It's a surface battle. It's a pseudo battle. The pseudo eros of time and the pseudo eros of eternity are at battle with each other. But the depth eros of time and the depth eros of eternity are intimate with each other. They share identity, but in the context of otherness, they're not collapsible to each other. They're distinct. It's relative otherness. They participate in the same field of value. And actually, there's actually a first principle and first value in CosmoErotic Humanism that we actually never talk about until now, until this very second. And the first principle and first value of CosmoErotic Humanism is past, present, and future are inextricable aspects of the cosmos. That's time, which supervene, which means are interfaced with, are inter-included on an eternal dimension, that which is beneath and beyond time. And as such, reality is constituted by temporal eternity and by eternal temporality. We just made up a word, okay? But it's a beautiful word, right? It's not temporality and eternity. It's temporal eternity and eternal temporality. But they're not fused, right? A couple that fuses, right, becomes deadened, loses its eros, loses its life. A couple needs to be both part of a larger union, but yet in distinct and dialectical relationship. So eternality and temporality don't become one word. It's a word, eternal temporality, temporal eternity. But it's a love story. The fundamental disorder in the global intimacy disorder, which is prior to all the other 13 expressions of the global intimacy disorder, as expressed in the book First Principles and First Values, is, right, the alienation, the failure of intimacy between time and eternity. Actually, they share identity, and they actually, in the context of otherness, 1 and 2. 3, they recognize each other. But it's even deeper. Stay close, right? They feel each other. How do we know they feel each other? Because eternity is allured by time. That's what Blake is saying. And I'm just going to use Blake because it's an easy way to access it. Eternity is in love with the productions of time. Eternity is allured to time. Right? Right? The reason, right, that eternity, whose quality is love, desire is love, moves towards manifestation, why the infinite desires intimacy, which is why we call the name of God in CosmoErotic Humanism the infinite intimate, is because the infinite feels the lure of time's becoming. The infinite intimate feels the lure of time's becoming, right? So there's a mutuality of feeling. And then when I'm in time, right, I'm in the hour of time, I'm searching for eternity. And where does eternity live, says Blake? Eternity's in an hour, right? So I'm in time, but I get lost in time. I'm not sure what to do in time, so I start killing time. No, when I actually enter into the very depth of time, right, I actually realize that what I'm yearning for is eternity. Eternity that discloses itself in the moment, right? So there's a mutuality of feeling between eternity and time, and there's a mutuality of value. That's what I just read. There's a first principle and a first value called eternal temporality and temporal eternity. There's a mutuality of value. And finally, stay with me, okay? We okay? There's a mutuality of purpose. And that's the purpose of both time and eternity is teshuvah. Teshuvah, which came to the English, its English translation, repentance and penitence, which came through the Latin, which understands repentance and penitence as a human action connected to violation and punishment, is not actually what the lineage means. That's a corruption of teshuvah. Teshuvah means to return. But to return is not a human action per se, although, as we'll see next week and the week after, and we talked about it in the mystery school, but we're going to try and deepen it now immeasurably, not this week, in the future, but just at the core, teshuvah means to return. What does it mean to return? So stay close for a second. To return means that infinity discloses itself in finitude. Infinity loves so madly, is allured, desires so madly, right, the productions of time, that infinity steps back, hides the fullness of its own presence, power, potency, energy, which would obliterate the emergence of a manifest world. So it engages in a sacrificial act of recoil, of tzimtzum, of stepping back, right? Because she loves so much. I love you so much, I'm going to step back and bracket myself so that you can emerge. That's kenosis. That's this divine emptying out. It's beautiful. No, stay close. So the reason, the movement, that which drives eternity is love desire. Love desire for what? To actually birth reality, to birth all of the real, to birth the manifest world, and then to gift the manifest world with its own essence. So infinity not just desires finitude, not just births finitude. Infinity invests itself and suffuses finitude with itself. I love you so much, I'm going to actually pour myself into you. I'm going to allow myself to need you. I'm going to make myself, in some sense, dependent on your mood. I'm going to need your partnership. I'm going to actually refuse to become whole unless we become whole together. So infinity turns to finitude. God turns to world and says, let's you and I make it all whole together. Teshuvah is the movement of love desire that is the currency of cosmos that returns reality to its original wholeness, stay with me, and more and beyond. So it's not just a return home. It's not just a journey home. It's not just I'm coming back. It's not just a divine exercise. It's not just a divine exercise. It's not just, okay, divinity's loving so much, I'm going to manifest finitude, and then finitude, which doesn't realize its wholeness, which lives in fragmentation and brokenness, will realize its true nature and come home. It's not just we're in the Garden of Eden, wholeness, we're exiled from the garden, exile, brokenness, fragmentation, the fall, and then we're going to find our way back to the garden, back to the original wholeness. No, we're going to find our way back to the garden, but the way back to the garden is not just restorative. Does everyone get that word restorative? I'm not just restoring the original wholeness. I'm not just restoring the prior condition. I'm adding to it. My journey, my irreducibly unique journey, our irreducibly unique journey, right? The journey in which we birth, right, from matter to life to the depth of the self-reflective human mind, Homo sapien. Then we birth Homo Amor. We become actually she in person, right? The amorous cosmos in person. We actually become Metatron. We actually become the new human, new humanity. And the new human and the new humanity is the lived conscious realization that I am a unique configuration of temporality and eternity itself. I am temporal eternity and I am eternal temporality. I am the love child of the great love story. I'm the unique love child of the great love story between time and eternity. Oh my God, right? How can you not laugh with joy? When you realize, how can you not laugh with joy? I am the unique love child. Reality is a unique love child, and I am an irreducibly unique love child of that love child, of the great love story. What's the great love story? The great love story is the love story between time and eternity. You know, T.S. Eliot, I was reading T.S. Eliot right before the mystery school, 4 quartets, because as I was writing, I started preparing mystery school a little late this year, because I was trying to get some thoughts down for the work that Lane and I were doing on time and eternity. A whole bunch of passages in T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets kept flashing through my mind. And I realized that, Eliot in 4 quartets is actually talking about the relationship of time and eternity. So let me just read you the most famous passage, and we'll move to close here. Eliot writes, "We shall not cease from exploration." Right? We shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive at where we started and know the place for the first time. I'm not just returning. The act of returning, right, actually turns the whole thing. Right? There's more wholeness than there was in the beginning. There's more God. There's more God to come. There's more wholeness to come. Right? Love and desire, when we come together, 1 + 1 no longer equals 2. That is the essential equation of love, is that 1 + 1 don't equal 2. The essential equation of love desire is that 1 + 1 equals infinity. Right? You know the difference between great love, right? Great love, ordinary great love, and outrageous love? It's the difference between a very high number and infinity. The difference between ordinary love and great love is the difference between an unimaginably high number and infinity, right? That's the fundamental love equation as a non-equation. 1 + 1 does not equal 2. 1 + 1 equals infinity. My singular expression of temporality, eternity, right, is the love child of reality. That's who I am. And healing the relationship of time and eternity, right? The broken leadership of Iran has a degraded relationship between time and eternity. And although there's no moral equivalence in certain very, very critical vectors, obviously, it's also true that the postmodern suffusion of so much of the West, which allows my friend Harari to say any value ascribed to your life is a mere delusion, also has a degraded relationship between time and eternity. At the core, one dismisses time, the other dismisses eternity, at the very core. Now, we don't actually violate time to find 70 virgins in heaven, and we don't get lost in the pseudo-eros of 70 virgins on Pornhub in order to escape the banalities of time, which seems to be a tale told by an idiot because I've been told that there's no field of value. No, we actually have to reawaken. We have to reawaken. We have to reinitiate the great cosmic marriage between time and eternity, the great Heros Gamos between time and eternity, right? That's the new story of value. So, wow, that's what we want to talk about a little bit in the next weeks, this new chapter of the story of value, but in the most personal and intimate way. We want to make this real in the stories of our lives, even as we make it real in the new story of value. So thank you so much for listening, for being with us, for who we must be becoming, together. Madly. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Marc Gafni, and thank everyone for being here. Like, what just happened? Maybe let's spend a moment in the chat box and just pour in hearts and joy and wows and oh my God. Can you believe that we're actually here? What a huge invitation to be David J. Temple together. And we actually did it together right now, right here, telling a new story about time, about eternity, about infinity, about time, and the way that we see time, the way that we live in time, the way that we relate to past, present, and future determines who we are as a human being and who we can become. And as Marc said it so beautifully, the battle for the future of humanity has begun. And here we are, we're doing it together. And so thank you for placing your attention, for sharing your time, for being here. It matters infinitely because this is the place where this new Dharma, this new vision gets to be articulated, gets to be downloaded, gets to be made possible. And so we're all doing this together, and this is the moment to sign up for who we must become. If you are not a member, you are simply a fool. Like, this is the place to be. And as we always say here, we're here together as a non-profit. We're doing this together. We're not here to get rich, but we're here to actually respond to suffering of humanity together. So let's pour in our hearts, let's pour in our resources and make this possible together, and sign up for the community. Join us. And on the inside, you actually get access to so much, to the courses, twice a week prayer with Dr. Marc Gafni live. We have 8 bodywork sessions with Dr. Christina Kincaid, whole body gospel, to feel the Dharma pouring, oozing into and through our bodies. There's a whole program that is happening. We're going to be talking a lot more about that in the next week, so make sure that you sign up. I do also want to say, we said we just had Mystery School, but we're already planning, of course, for next year. So the next dates for next year's Mystery School are 2027, April 19 till April 23. So block that week in your calendar. Make sure that you fly to Europe and that you are actually in that room, because it's going to be even better than this year, I'm sure, because there is more joy to come.